Charles Berger tonight, and we're so fortunate to have him. We'll start with an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I received my bachelor's degree from Pennsylvania State University and my master's and PhD from Michigan State University. I've worked at a couple different universities, including Illinois State University, Northwestern, and currently at UC Davis, and continue to work there as a professor and serve as a chairman on the Department of Communications. I worked previously as the president of the International Communication Association. I've also published multiple books, including one that I will talk most about, The Language and Social Knowledge Uncertainty of Interpersonal Relationships.
You just mentioned your book about the uncertainty in interpersonal relationships. Can you expand on your theory more?
Sure. My theory is centered around how I believe that it is completely natural to have doubts about our ability to predict the outcome of initial interactions with people and personal relationships. I really wanted to focus on how human communication is used to gain knowledge and create understanding. This is really important to understand with any communication situation because we want to make sure that people are more confident and not afraid of social interaction.
Interesting. So, what type of reactions reduce uncertainty about your new acquaintances?
First, anticipation of future interaction, meaning we know that we will see them again. Second, incentive value, that they have something we want. And third, deviance, they act in a weird way.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Say, Chris and Robin start working at a new company together. They do not know each other at the time and have to work on an important project together for the next couple months. They each think the same thing. Do they have any quirks that I should know about? Will we get along? Will my partner take my project seriously? After they get to know each other a bit, Chris notices that Robin has obsessive-compulsive disorder about everything staying in sync, but helped when she was getting things done on time. Robin found out that Chris is from a corporate office and needs to make sure that the project is perfect. Soon, they realize that they work well together after the anticipation stages are over. The uncertainty reduction theory rests on basic assumptions that creates cognitive discomfort, which people try to reduce.
Very good. Tell me a little bit more about your axiom part of this theory.
An axiom is described as the self-evident truth that requires no additional proof. There are 7 that I have researched and theorized along with many other scholars. The first is verbal communication, which means that the more verbal output that happens, the level of uncertainty decreases. The next is nonverbal warmth. This is all about body language and positive gestures that make someone feel more willing to communicate, even if there is no words to be exchanged. Going down the list is information seeking. For example, if Chris and Robin begin to start asking each other questions about one's personal life, it can reflect on their business relationship and hopefully begin to be more comfortable around each other. An important one to remember is self-disclosure, which means that individuals will disclose information about themselves to reduce uncertainty in the other person, and then encouraging them to communicate openly. The next is reciprocation of communication. This means that individuals who interact like asking questions to one another and will become more comfortable in the situation. Another important one is similarity. Similarities between persons reduce uncertainty, while dissimilarities between people increase uncertainty. It is believed that more points of contact will help find out more about the person that you're reacting with. For example, for Chris and Robin, they will learn to appreciate one another and who they are without assuming who one another is. Overall, these axioms are very important to remember. These were not actually a part of my original theory. However, with the help of many other researchers, these axioms came to be. They moved with what the uncertainty reduction theory is confined to 2 strangers meeting. It becomes an entire social ordeal.
Excellent. After many years of research, you eventually switched your focus to the thought process that people go through in order to produce the message you speak. Can you explain?
Sure. I came to a conclusion that most social interactions are goal-driven and that we have many reasons for what we say when we say it. Basically, we continually discuss that plans are mental representations of actions used in a sequence that may be used to achieve our social goals. To put into a visual, there is a hierarchy of this type of situation. In this example, it is considered to be a tree or different levels of communication that have to be passed along. In this particular example, there's an overall strategy. For example, there's building relationship with a dispatcher or, say, your boss. And a couple of branches off of this tree is to be friendly or be professional. When you're friendly, you're smiling, you're holding eye contact, and when you're professional, you're arriving on time, you're wearing clean uniform, and you acknowledge that you're in a professional state.
What sort of strategies do you use for achieving this hierarchy?
I use a couple of different strategies. The first is passive strategy, which is an impression formation by observing the person interacting with others. This is used best as, say, a fly on the wall, meaning that we watch people interact from backstage. The second is the active strategy. This means that our impressions are formed by asking a third party about a person. We can recognize that our personal relationship with that third party might create a little bit of a bias, but we trust in ourselves to filter out that slanted view. And the last strategy is our impressions that are formed through face-to-face discussions with a person. The axioms that come into play is our self-disclosure and the ability to extract information from others without seeming to pry on one another's lives or information. We have to be transparent in order to gain trust and be socially acceptable with these people.
How complex are these plans to execute these strategies?
So, how complex the plan is depends on how much detail is within the plan and the number of other plans that you think out in case plan number one doesn't work out. So, if that's a little confusing, for example, you're predicted to make top dollar in your budget plans with your job, seeing as you work every day from 9 to 5. However, you have to think of backup plans when you get sick or there's a family emergency and you have to leave work. In that case, you have to figure out a way to make all of that money up when you're missing work. And you'll have to figure out ways that you can make it up in order to figure out the other things that come up in your life. So will you have just one plan A alone, or will you have plans A through Z just in case life happens?
You've mentioned that you've used the term hedging or humor theories to help get individuals out of awkward situations. Tell me a little bit more.
So the term hedging is essentially used to strategically use humor and to provide a way for both parties to save face when something goes completely wrong. In one scenario, my partner Jan has completely miscalculated our project numbers for the year, and it turns out to be just because of one simple formula that was used wrong. So in this situation, I could step up and say that it was equally my fault, as well as even though I did my part correctly. But in the same scenario, I can also use humor to ease the tension of a mistake. I can try to make a joke to make Jan feel more comfortable and not put as much stress onto her.
Tell me more about your uncertainty and the anxiety management theory that you and William Gundy Kuntz have discussed.
Oh yeah, William. He's a good friend of mine. My theories are actually what inspired him to work on the anxiety and uncertainty portion of his theory. I'd like to think that it lays all hand in hand. Anyways, William figured that through my 7 axioms, at least one person goes through some sort of anxiety while having a social interaction and feels that their levels of uncertainty increases. So this anxiety and uncertainty theory is an intercultural theory that claims higher levels of uncertainty and anxiety lead to greater misunderstandings when strangers don't communicate mindfully. Since these are levels of anxiety, William's theories differ a little bit from mine. For one, anxiety is just basically a feeling of being uneasy or worried about what might happen. This causes a lot of misunderstanding right away. So there's actually 34 different variables that can link up to anxiety. And a couple of common ones are self-esteem issues, perceived differences, negative expectations, a lack of power, and so on. There's also different thresholds for fear and doubt that lead to anxiety. So sometimes anxiety isn't a bad thing, it makes people more cautious and observant. And along with this, it makes people a little bit more mindful. So when we are mindful of other people's situation, it makes for their anxiety to decrease instead of making them think about it over and over again. So, for example, someone who you don't know that well but know enough to know that they could have suffered a loss in their family but hasn't expressed much emotion about it, it would be mindful of you to avoid talking about maybe death or using terms that are death related just so that your friend can have a better peace of mind and feel a little bit more comfortable talking to you.
Any last thoughts?
I think that it is important to remember that everyone who we communicate with, especially strangers, are going through the same thought process as we are. We all want to impress, but not overbear, and we want to hopefully end up as friends or even acquaintances in the end. I like to think that communication in our world is a bit better, and people are more mindful of what they say and do around others. So I continue to do a lot of research and hope that I can find that I or my fellow theorists can help with. For one, what could be the more basic study of communication than the propositions that are essential for survival and that is only possible through the reduction of uncertainty? Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for Skyping in.